money was put in. And your pension checks added up to, I don't know, $30,000, so that's it. The amount over the 30,000 would go into your estate.
The balance goes to your estate.
Yeah, the balance goes into.
You're in the series now.
You're in SERS now. You're in the SERS hybrid.
Right.
SERS has Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 2A, and the hybrid.
So go back to my original question is, what does dying early mean? How many years?
Okay. Question is, what does dying early mean? It's an interesting question because the way in which pension funds are set up is on the assumption that people are going to live generally to 82. So if you die earlier than 82, that's dying early. If you go over it, then you will collect more than you put into it. Okay, but on average, the actuaries have figured this out so that the whole thing works. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
What about people who will reach retirement age but maybe only have 20 years service? Is it still worthwhile moving into the hybrid?
I couldn't hear a thing.
Yeah, I'll repeat the question. I got it. Okay. What about people who don't have 20 years, who reach retirement age but only have, say, 10 years, something like that? Is it worth it to do it? Yes. Okay. I mean, you're not going to get the same pension as somebody who has 20, 30 years, but you will get much more than you would get leaving it in R. Okay. And again, I've run so many of these scenarios with people. I have yet to find one where people not only did better, but did a lot better in money terms.
And does part-time and full-time play any part of this? If you're an employee and a part-time employee or a full-time employee, does that make any difference to?
Does part-time or full-time make a difference? It's under discussion and contention right now. Okay, the whole issue of how to count part-time employment. So it's a complication. What I recommend to people who have part-time service, if they do transfer, is to claim it. To claim as much time as you can pay for. Okay, and then they're not going to just take your word for it. The Retirement Services Commission is our division is going to do its own audit, and then they'll come back and they'll say, okay, well, this is the number of years that we think you have. Okay, and then you look at that very closely, and if you disagree with that, then you go to your union, okay, and you say, I think I should get 3 more years, okay, and then so keep contending it in that way. I mean, there's no way you can lose in this. It's a question of sort of maximizing. And again, and there's no reason for them not to give you that time if you can pay for it. Okay, but they're sort of making up rules as they go along now, and some of those rules have been reversed. For example, they said you had to retire after 2011. Okay, well, we contended that. Okay, and now it's been pushed back to 2009. So there's a lot of stuff that's in process right now, and some of the stuff is legal stuff. The state, by the way, I think in part, maybe in large part, because we made such a stink about Robinson and Cole, changed their attorneys to Ice Miller, which is out of state and is more of a neutral firm. Yes?
Yeah. My question's two-part, I guess. So if you decide that you want to transfer into the Sears account, they take the funds from your IMG account and transfer that in? That's part one of the question. Okay?
Yes, let me repeat it again.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're transferring, they take money from your ING account and just roll it into the state. And the answer is yes.
And then, but there's gonna be a difference in what you really actually owe. So now you gotta add to that amount. Is that correct? I mean, that's probably, or is that correct?
Well, either you have more or less than you need. And if you have more than you need, then the money just remains there, and you end up with now the classic three-legged stool of retirement. You have Social Security, you have a defined benefit pension, and you have savings. Okay, you can continue a 403B or a 457 if you have those going on, that totally unaffected.
The second part is, can you take, if you also had a four-legged stool where you have a TIA credit account, can you take that and buy additional credits? Transfer the money in and buy credits for service that goes beyond the years you've necessarily worked?
Thank you for the question, because that's our next project, is that right now you effectively can't buy more credits than the actual time that you're here. But almost every other state pension fund allows you to do that. It's called purchasing service credits. Okay, California allows you to purchase up to 5 for any reason whatsoever. Okay, some states say it has to be public sector service, so there are all these differences around it. What Connecticut has is you can buy military time. Okay, that's clear. Very few people have done it. Okay, and for people who don't have military time, if you had service in another state and Connecticut has a reciprocal agreement with that state, you can buy time. Okay. Well, we asked for a long time for a list of the states that Connecticut has a reciprocal agreement with. For example, I worked in California, I worked in Texas, 2 states that I could potentially take advantage of that. Well, at the end of the day, they admitted Connecticut has no reciprocal agreements with anyone. So it has this kind of sitting there, without meaning. Now, our next project is going to be to liberalize the purchase of retirement credits. If I can go a little bit further on this, because this is a very important point that is connected to this and to the whole general issue. When we started this, I believed, everybody I was working with believed that the reason why CSRS was so much more generous than ARP was that the state was putting more money into it than ARP. Okay, and if you look at, if anybody's in the finances offices here, when they do our paychecks, they take out about 10% for ARP, 8% that goes into us, and then 2% for administration. Okay, but for CSRS people, they take out, 46%. I mean, it's extraordinarily higher. And so we assume that, well, yeah, they're putting more money into it, so, okay. And it was a tremendous revelation when we found out that actually CSRS costs the state less than ARP. The only reason why it's putting all of that into it is because way back in the 1980s, they weren't properly funding it, and they got behind. And so now they're playing catch up. Okay, but in terms of the ongoing costs, a defined benefit system is much more efficient and less costly for the employer. It's a lot like health insurance. Okay, the way in which a public sector thing is cheaper in the long run and produces better results. Yes?
Can you speak to the status of the grievance, the outstanding grievance, and do you think, let's suppose it's awarded in our favor, it makes sense to wait and see what happens with that before you transfer to CSRS?
Yeah, good question. The grievance, and okay, if you ask me when is the IRS going to rule, it could be weeks, it could be years, and nobody knows. When that was the only thing going for us, CBAC contacted its friends in Congress, in Blumenthal and in Senate, to try to speed this up. They did what they did, but not even they could speed it up. So have no idea. But that, to some degree, that works in our favor because they're keeping the window of opportunity open until that decision is made or 90 days after it. So, you know, a good long time to do this. Okay, now let me answer the second part of it. Does it make sense to wait for that? I would argue unequivocally no. Okay, and this is why I think no. When I first saw the hybrid, okay, you know, and I read through it, you know, I thought, well, for younger workers, since they would have to pay 3% more of salary, okay, with the hybrid than you do with tier 2 or 2A, they should wait. Then I had a 35-year-old woman in my office kind of going through all of this, and I began to realize, wait a second, she doesn't want to have to stay in Connecticut for the rest of her working life necessarily. I mean, let's say she gets a job in California she wants, you know, why should she be stuck to this plan? Okay, well, the reason why you get stuck to a defined benefit plan is because, you know, if you leave one early, since the whole benefit is based upon final salary, you could potentially lose. But the way the hybrid is set up, she could have her choice of a cash out provision. And the cash out, she couldn't take it at age 35.
We can still hear you without the microphone.
Yeah, the question is whether this thing, it sort of goes on and on. The cash out she couldn't take then, but it would sit in the state coffers until she retires. It would build up interest, and then she could decide whether it was better to take that or to take the pension benefit that she would get. So I don't see any reason for anyone to wait for that decision. I actually think the hybrid is a better plan than what we want in the grievance award. Okay. Yes, sir.
Okay, if we transfer our funds and we're still working, then until we retire, we would be paying 5% of our salary into the hybrid plan, right?
What year did you start?
99.
Yes, you would be paying 5%. If you started before July of 97, you'd be paying 3%. Okay, you're paying 5% into ARP. So you wouldn't see any difference in your take-home pay.
Could I ask just one, I'm just curious about this because you mentioned TIA CREF and a lot of people around the country have had this plan for a long time in education. And do you think had the state stayed with TIA CREF that this wouldn't have happened? Or do you still think whether it's TIA CREF or AIM or whatever, it still is a better deal? Because, you know, I know a lot of people who have TIA CREF who are very happy with it. It's a very stable, they're very good service. And just
The question is if the state had stayed with TIA CREF, would we be having this problem? The answer is absolutely yes. Okay, between TIAA and CREF and ING, in terms of benefits, it's hard to distinguish between them.
When you're actually implementing this, do you have to